I'll tell you why the Buffalo Bills having a chokehold on the AFC East is bad for the whole AFC. We'll do it today on Locked On NFL.
The barbershop is open and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
It is, in fact, your team every day. We thank you for making us your first listen here on Locked On NFL. I'm Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On NFL podcast. Every single day I come on here in the barbershop in the afternoon and give you all the big stories around the league and the things that are on the mind of the fans, the consciousness of the fans. Today, we're going to preview the AFC East and the AFC South. Riding solo today. That's all good, though. My man Chris Carter is taking care of some business, so we're going to give you the business here on Locked On NFL. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $50 in bonus bets. Win your first $5 bet wins. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. What up to the everydayers? I wanted to just say hello to you and make sure that you know you are very, very important. And if you're new to the show, we appreciate you joining us here today. I'm going to use a lot of clips here to eventually get to this at the end of the show. When we talk about the AFC South, I predicted that Trevor Lawrence could have an MVP season. I'll tell you why he needs redemption and how that could happen. I'll look at the rest of the AFC South right smack in the middle of this show. And then, of course, at the very top, we're going to start with the AFC East. Buffalo is the team. Buffalo isn't just the team in the AFC East. Buffalo is the team everywhere. I mean, but because they're in the AFC East and because the AFC East is not particularly strong, even though we'll talk a little bit about the Patriots and the Dolphins also having a little bit to say about that. I just think it's now the new AFC West. For a long time, the Chiefs didn't have a division rival that would, even though now I will say this, they had some games in their division that were very hard. There were times when the Chargers would give them tough games. There have been times when the Raiders and the Broncos have given them tough games because of the rivalry in the division. But look, they've pretty much gone unscathed for a long time in the AFC West, and that has given them home field advantage. That has made life pretty easy for them, right? Like people think it's going to be for Houston this year, and we'll discuss that. I think the Bills are the team to beat, not only because of the division that they're in, because they are also very sound in how they're built, and they added to the strength of this team in a little bit of a different way. Listen to Joe Marino.
Let's talk about reasons to be excited about the Bills' defensive tackles in 2025. And number one for me is the infusion of young talent. The Bills over the last two drafts have been deliberate about selecting defensive tackles. Of course, in 2024, it was Dwayne Carter out of Duke with pick 95. Then this past year, the Bills traded up twice for defensive tackles. The first time to get TJ Sanders out of South Carolina at pick 41. And the other was Deion Walker, the defensive tackle from Kentucky, at 109.
They doubled back on Kentucky because last year they got Ray Davis. And Ray Davis is way better than where he was picked. And there's some people that think Deion Walker at 6'7", about 798 pounds, can do the same thing. I do like the TJ Sanders pick for him. And then combined with Carter last year, they just have a type, man. And the type that they have are dudes that have a large body of work that fight their butt off, and they don't really pay attention to measurables. Ed Oliver ain't the biggest person in the world, but he's another one. He just goes hard. It's all gas, no brakes. And that really symbolizes what Buffalo is as a team, and that's why they are in the position that they're in. There's a young team, though, over there that has a new coach that I'm going to tell you, the Patriots aren't going to be afraid of anybody. And one of the reasons is people talk about Belichick and what he did and what he didn't do at the end of his tenure, but he drafted a really, really good player in a certain cornerback named Gonzalez. Check this out.
Christian Gonzalez's ceiling is simply elite. I don't think anybody would argue that. A second-team All-Pro in his second season after missing 13, 14 games during his rookie year. This is somebody who's only played in 20 games. An elite ceiling. Last season, Gonzalez was only targeted 84 times in 16 games and had one of the lowest target rates in the league outside of the red zone. teams did test him to no avail. Christian Gonzalez, shutdown ability, eraser ability, has all the potential to be one of, if not the best corner in football.
I'll tell you right now, Christian Gonzalez, in my opinion, is a top 5 corner. And Nick Cattles from Locked On Patriots just explained exactly why. This dude has played 20 games and he's a second-team All-Pro. And he got injured his rookie year. And he had to rehab from that injury. He wasn't getting better. He was just trying to get back to where he was. And look how he played. Now you add Carlton Davis on the other side and a whole bunch of other people, Milton Williams and everything else. And then the mentality that Mike Vrabel has, it is all gas, no brakes for those young Patriots. We're going to see how they do, of course, with their young quarterback, Drake May, also. Now, Justin Fields is now with the Jets. Aaron Glenn is the new head coach. There's a lot of blue sky. It might not show up in the record department this first year, but at least they know where they're headed with their future. It's like when you finally change directions, you ain't there. It's almost like going to the gym your first day or maybe your first week when you consistently go. You know you're on your way. You get on that scale and you don't weigh that. Your weight hasn't gone down, but you feel better. And that's where the Jets fans are. Listen to John Butchko from Locked On Jets.
You know, whenever you're trying to get something out of a young quarterback, people tend to think it's either all about the coaching or it's all about the individual quarterback. You know, if the quarterback succeeds, some people will give the offensive coordinator all the credit. Other people will say it was all about the quarterback. And in reality, it's part from column A and part from column B. Fields himself needs to improve. The Jets also need to put Fields in a good spot. And that means, you know, developing a handful of passing concepts he's comfortable with to be your staple plays. And it also means taking advantage of Fields' ability as a runner.
It's very rare that a dude is on his third team in 3 years and people still seem optimistic and hopeful. That usually is something that doesn't really fly. Of course, lately we've seen reclamation projects like Sam Darnold and, of course, Baker Mayfield. But I would argue that Fields has never even played as well as, well, maybe Sam Darnold, but he hasn't played as well as Baker did before Baker needed to be reborn. So we'll see how that goes. I know some stuff needs to go on in South Florida. I don't know what's going on down there. I do know this. They still have a bunch of speed and explosiveness. And if you don't come to play, Miami's going to bust you in your mouth. And one of them is that running back, Devin Achane. Listen to my man, Kyle Krabs, talk about his impact on Miami.
So if Achane plays probably similar touches, maybe a little bit more skewed to the passing game, I could see him pushing for 9-10 on this list next year. But that's dependent on the Dolphins line performing at a super high level. That's not even a super high level, just not a super low level, I should say. Achane himself performing at a much higher level and being a little bit more consistent with some of the reads. And then the perimeter skill players blocking better as well, which I think was the biggest blockade for Achane runs in particular.
If you really want guys to block better, you might want to get some bigger people because Jalen Waddle and the Cheetah ain't that big. Cheetah's strong now, but they aren't the people that you think about when you think about blocking. So that's going to be something to watch. Kyle Krabs and the Dolphins. All right, I'm going to give you my whole synopsis of the AFC South. It's Buffalo, all right? But I'll talk about the Patriots a little bit here and why Miami is still a very, very sneaky team. I'll get to that at the top of segment 2, and then we'll switch it over and we'll go to the AFC South. We're probably going to do the North and the West tomorrow. Those are the teams where the real competitors are. But nonetheless, we'll get to it here in just a second on Locked On Jaguars. All right, today's show is sponsored and brought to you by FanDuel. No doubt about that, man. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling, man? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. You can even go with them if you do it early enough. Whether I'm placing the same game parlay or watching a bet ride into the 9th inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I'm part of the action. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, a quick review of my preview of the AFC South. Buffalo's the cream of the crop, man. Buffalo's the cream of the crop in the AFC East. They are the cream of the crop in the AFC East. We know that. By that, they are going to be one of the 2 or 3 favorites. Might be the favorite to get home field advantage. Because I think Kansas City, who is going to be favored to win the West, they got a tough road ahead of them. That division has gotten really, really tough, and there's no easy games each week. And, of course, the AFC North, Baltimore is the cream of the crop, but you still have to deal with the rivalry with the Bengals and their explosive offense. And then Pittsburgh has gotten a lot better, man, and they might have something to say. Sounds like 95 social wars. We got something to say in Pittsburgh, right? Except it was Atlanta. But you guys get it if you follow hip-hop. Listen, I'm still picking the Bills to win that division, to walk away with that vision, but I'm looking at those upstart Patriots. Could those Patriots be what those Broncos were last year? Like that team that you know they're going to be better because of the presence of the coach. You don't necessarily all the way fully trust the roster, but you kind of do. Like we got to worry about the O-line that they tried to address in New England and the wide receivers. But I do think they've thrown resources and bodies at those 2 positions. And what's going to happen is an improvement of coaching. Josh McDaniels running the offense, not being the head coach, just running the offense. I think they're going to get a lot better and find an identity. New England might be one of those teams that wins 9 or 10 games. I'm glad they have 3 wild card teams now because I pulled for a team in Jacksonville that's going to have a dogfight with the Houston Texans, and we might need that 3rd wild card if we do not win the division. I say we because I cover the Jacksonville Jaguars. And with that, we will go to the AFC South. Houston is basically thought of to be the team that Buffalo is for the East. That's what Houston is for the South. Now, I digress a little bit because the Jaguars have played Houston really, really tough. Trevor Lawrence, in fact, has had maybe 2 of the best 4 games he's played in his life in Reliance Stadium against C.J. Stroud and the Houston Texans. I think they won one and they lost the other one. But he has played well in those games. It all comes down to C.J. Stroud. No clip is necessary here. My man John Hickman does a great job with Locked On Texans, him and Big Sarge. And look, the bottom line is Houston is loaded at a lot of positions, but they have a problem that's a big problem. That is, people are unsure about their front, their offensive line. You've seen Dallas have a lot of talent. You've seen other teams. The Chiefs had a lot of talent, won a lot of games, but when they played a really, really good team that could exploit the fact that they weren't solid up front, you saw what happened. I wonder if that's going to happen to Houston. Because if it does happen to Houston, that means that it opens the door for some other teams. I'll get to the Jaguars in a second. I'll do that last. I don't think it opens the door for the Colts, but I think the Colts are also the type of team you don't know what to expect. They got some pretty good players. They're trying to revamp their offensive line. They got decent receivers. They have a really, really good running back. I just don't know about that quarterback, and I just don't know about that defense. Rest in peace to Jim Irsay. I'm sure that he will be missed in that organization, but also sometimes this is it galvanizes teams when teams look at and see what's important. When they lose someone that is that valuable and important to a franchise, you usually see them have more of a spirited effort, and we're not using his untimely death as some sort of motivation, but it is natural that people find things to play for. Will they be better up front, and will it help their quarterback situation? Maybe Daniel Jones is the answer. Check out Locked On Coach talk about that O-line.
We saw the Colts early last season prior to the injuries really piling up. The offensive line looked awesome. It looked really, really strong, and they were running the ball really well and protecting the quarterback. And you saw guys like Will Fries and Bernhard Raimann taking that next step. And this Colts offensive line room was probably top 3, top 5 in the league to start last season. Now you get to how it ended last year, though, which was injuries to Ryan Kelly, injuries to Will Fries that knocked him out for the season. The Braden Smith thing that happened last year that's been well documented this offseason. When that happens, your depth is really pushed and tried, and most NFL teams don't have quality players behind. So really just the overall group when it comes to the Colts offensive line this year is going to be tested by just how good their depth is and how healthy they stay at the top.
The Colts can be one of those sneaky teams, man. I mentioned the Broncos. Yeah, they could be a hard out for you. They could be like Seattle was, and sometimes Arizona is that way. I don't have the star power for them, but I will tell you this. I got a feeling Daniel Jones is going to start more games than Anthony Richardson, and I think that's going to help him. I actually did see Daniel Jones look very, very good. Y'all remember the first time I saw him play his rookie year, and I know it's going way back. He's messed up several times. But I think they're another team that was a bad spot for a young quarterback, right? I just saw him in a game against Tampa, and Tampa had a really, really good team, man. And Danny Dimes looked like a world beater in that game. And I'm wondering if he gets into a different situation, gets out of the spotlight of New York, if it changes for him a little bit. Look, I know I'm reaching for it, but I can't help myself. I just don't know with the Colts, man. They're one of those teams you can't put your finger on, but I do know that they're solid in some areas. If that offensive line is as good as he says, to go along with that running back and those receivers, I really like a lot of those big receivers, and up in the slot too, Downs in the slot. But they added Big Tyler Warren, man, and maybe that's just another cog, a guy who can block and get out and cause problems in the middle of the seam and in the red zone. Maybe it gives them a little bit of an identity combined with all of their other players, man, and Jonathan Taylor and all of those dudes, and maybe the coach can pull a rabbit out of a hat. I want to see what the Titans do, and I'm going to let you know right now that Tyler Rowland is going to tell you right now, and he's going to really tell you. I want you to hear Tyler Rowland from Locked On Titans talk about their outlook for this season.
Titans fans, training camp is now 2 weeks away, and that means it's time to start our 2025 Locked On Titans training camp preview. Quarterbacks, obviously, Cam Ward is a lock to make the roster. The number 1 overall pick will be your starting quarterback in week 1. But my second lock at the quarterback position to make this roster is Brandon Allen. Now listen. Brandon Allen is not a very good backup quarterback. He's 2 for 8 in his 10 career starts. Not somebody who's going to win games if he has to play. But I'm going to give you 2 major reasons why Brandon Allen is a lock for me despite that. Number 1, Brandon Allen was Joe Burrow's backup for 3 seasons in Cincinnati when he was first drafted. I think Brandon Allen is more of a coach in the locker room for Cam Ward than he's ever meant to be a player out on the field. And number 2, like I said, you're going to lose games with Brandon Allen. And if you're the Titans and Cam Ward isn't out on the field, you probably want to lose games and set yourself up to build the roster as best as possible. Now, I would tell you Will Levis is on the bubble. Now, if the Titans keep Will Levis on the team, he will be a lock to make the roster. But I say Will Levis is on the bubble because I still think that he will be traded before week 1. And then the long shot is Tim Boyle. And to beat out Brandon Allen as a coach and beat out Will Levis if he's not traded, that makes Tim Boyle a major long shot. But check out Locked On Titans.
Love it. Love the energy from Titans. You can check Tyler out on Locked On Titans as well as the Madman Show here on Locked On NFL early in the morning each day before I do the barbershop in the afternoon. I agree, but I disagree. And here's why I disagree. The Titans ain't trying to lose no games to build a roster because they've been losing already. And that's why they're picking again where they're picking at, right? But here's what I will tell you. If Cam Ward isn't out there and Brandon Allen's on that team because they don't trust Will Levis. And if Brandon Allen can at least be functional, that might save Coach Callahan his job if Ward isn't there. I think Coach Callahan has to win this year. Even if his quarterback gets hurt, this ain't college where they're going to give you a mulligan because your star quarterback went out. They will fire you in a heartbeat in the NFL. So if that happens, Brandon Allen's on this team because they need to be able to survive a 2, 3, or 4 week stretch. He ain't going to take them to the playoffs. I don't even think the roster is good enough to do that. But I will tell you this. Sometimes it's just about survival. And I saw enough whoops-a-daisies from Will Levis and enough silly stuff that the coach even talked about. They know they can't win with that kid at all. So they bring in somebody that can function in the offense. He ain't great. He ain't all that. But guess what? They trust him. And that's what it is. It's like having an old veteran point guard. That's what it is. And that's what it is for the Titans. We're going to talk about Trevor Lawrence, but I'm going to use my man Peter Bukowski in segment number 3. I'll tell you what I think about the AFC South as a whole and make a little bit of a prediction. And then we'll get into Trevor Lawrence. And the debate that Bukowski has about Jordan Love is the same one I have about Trevor Lawrence. And I even did my local show on Locked On Jaguars and said that Trevor could possibly be an MVP candidate. I'll tell you why I feel that way in just a second here on Locked On NFL. All right, segment 3 here on Locked On NFL. Listen, my summation of this, or summary of this division, this preview is this. Houston's on paper is the team to beat, and they should be. They've been to the playoffs last couple of years. They, even with a bad offensive line, they still made it. They have really good edge rushers. They've tried to address some other spots on defense. They have a real, very, very tight secondary individually. Wide receiver, I love Nico Collins. They got Christian Kirk. I get it. Dalton Schultz. I get it. And they got some other people. They drafted a couple of really, really big, tall receivers. That Higgins kid out of Iowa State is, to me, he's almost a clone of Nico Collins. He's just not as fast. And then they invested in the running back position, both in the draft and then bringing in a veteran to back up Joe Mixon in Nick Chubb if he can stay healthy. Changing offensive coordinators, I think it gives them a little bit of blue sky. I'm not going to be biased here. I'm going to tell you that I would understand people picking them to win the division. You got to watch out for my Jags, though, because the Jacksonville Jaguars are not as bad as their record was last year. And Trevor Lawrence is not as bad as a lot of people would make y'all think. And I know I got on my man David Harrison yesterday about being biased about his Washington team. And I know people may assume that that's what I'm going to do here. I'm not. For those that aren't in Jacksonville, I discussed this earlier on my show, but I'll tell you now what I said. They had a bad offensive coordinator, a bad offensive line coach, a bad GM, and a coach that had kind of checked out, in my opinion, because he was just hell-bent on doing things his way, right? The old school way. I think Doug Peterson's a nice dude. Turns out a lot of people didn't like his form of communicating. They just didn't like it. There's a lot about the situation, though. I think a lot of that, too, had to do with Trent Baalke's presence. That's just my opinion. But when you look at it, their running backs got hit faster than any running backs in the league. Trevor has more drop passes since he's been in the National Football League than anybody. Everyone wants to just focus on the fact that he also has more turnovers, not interceptions, but turnovers, because he fumbles sometimes when he's running. That is another. He's running for his life. He also can't stay healthy because he's running for his life in the past. They added 4 offensive linemen. Travis Hunter, you know Brian Thomas Jr. can bring the gas. They get De'Ami Brown, right? They totally revamped 75% of the tight end room. They signed 4 offensive linemen in free agency and they drafted another one or 2, right? They improved their defense. That's going to give them the ball back more so they can get halftime of possession. And then they added to their running back room, which is a pretty decent and talented room. And now you add Liam Cohen. You add all of that alignment. You add them giving answers pre-snap. You add a more rhythmic offense. You add teaching in so things can translate from the practice field onto the games. You know how I feel about Trevor Lawrence? The same way Peter Bukowski feels about Jordan Love. But let me tell you something. Peter posted something, and he named the top 5 or 6 quarterbacks, and then he named like the next 7 or 8, and he didn't include Trevor. So I'm beefing with Peter too, because he's doing to me and Trevor and to us in Jacksonville what everybody's doing to Jordan Love. I want you to hear him describe this, and this is exactly the way that I feel about Trevor Lawrence.
Matt LaFleur, not a top 10 coach. Bummer. Another talking head goes on national TV and says some chucklehead thing like Caleb Williams is already better than Jordan Love because interceptions. Okay, cool. Nice. We're still doing interceptions in the year of our dear Lord 2025. Forget the sacks, forget the fumbles, forget the value added, forget the positive play generation. Just like 11 plays over the course of the season. That's the good sample. Sure. There still is this perception, and I believe it's a fantasy football problem, that this offense is not reliable and it's not very good. So somehow a coach that's not in the top 10 has elevated a quarterback who's also not in the top 10. In fact, a rookie who was one of the least efficient and least effective, least productive quarterbacks in the league last year. Is already better than the Packers quarterback. And a group of receivers that now is, I think, underrated, where it's like, well, it's a bunch of 4s and 5s. No, it's not. But that's the offense. That is top 5 in DVOA. That's top 10, top 8 in EPA per play, in success rate, in explosive plays. What more do you need to see? What is missing here? What is the problem? And My answer is fantasy football is a big reason because other than Josh Jacobs, you're not drafting anybody on this team, not high anyway. And Matt LaFleur has been criminally underrated his entire career. Youngest playoff team ever, youngest team to win a playoff game ever on the road. That doesn't give Matt LaFleur any cred. By the way, Brian Gutekunst did a hell of a job revamping this roster. Doesn't get any credit for that because they don't have anyone you would draft in the first 3 rounds of your fantasy football draft other than Josh Jacobs. And if it's just a running back, no one's going to care.
You see, that's just the way I feel. And I also feel like this. He's giving his coach credit. He's giving his GM credit. I can't give those people that were here the last 3 or 4 years credit for Trevor. In fact, I'm blaming them for the perception of Trevor Lawrence. They were the reason, not drafting big, strong offensive linemen and telling people that you got the worst offensive line in the league and you say the solution is, this is what Doug Peterson used to say, and this is what Trent Baalke used to say, that the solution was, well, they all have to be healthy. So you get out of 5 offensive linemen, 3 of them stink, and you just want them to be healthy. Okay, a healthy offensive lineman that sucks is going to suck when he's unhealthy or healthy. It does not matter. And it didn't matter. For y'all national folks, listen, they even said something like this. Doug says, we're not big and physical and strong enough. Trent says, we're not big and physical and strong enough in the trenches. Trent then goes to the combine a month later and says, you don't make people big and strong once they get to the NFL. They have to be that way already. Which means you didn't pick big, strong people when you should have. Come on, man. These offensive linemen were getting pancaked and pushed around, and they couldn't even convert. They had to keep going for it on 4th down, or they were going to settle for field goals. They couldn't even convert. They get the ball. The Jaguars probably lead the league in times that they got the ball inside the 5-yard line and didn't score. It's not a Trevor Lawrence problem. It's everybody else's problem. And because of that, I'll say this. Liam Cohen is going to fix Trevor Lawrence, and y'all better watch out. Trevor, if they win 11, 12 games, which they won 10 a couple of years ago, so they even sit here. They won 10 with all of the bad stuff I'm talking about in 2022, and they won 9 more in 2023. If they can do, as bad as they have been, they led the league in losses by 1 score or less. I'm telling you, Liam Cohen is worth more than 7 points a game for the Jaguars. Watch out. Y'all going to have to eat crow. Trevor Lawrence might be an MVP candidate. Make sure you tap in to Locked On NFL Scouting as we approach training camp, the team that you cover. We got 90 players, man, and if you don't know them all, Joe Marino and Kyle Krabs do on Locked On NFL Scouting, and they'll make you a smarter fan as you head into training camp. You can even check out your ops. Look at what I just did it. I just went through what all of these people, Tyler Rowland and all them yelling, all screaming and talking about what their teams are going to do. Yeah, I pay attention to them too, but I want to know all of these rosters. So make sure you check out Locked On NFL Scouting. Check out Tyler Rowland and Matt Man in the morning. I'll be back in the afternoon here on Locked On NFL. Until then, you guys take care. Thank you for joining us again here for these 28 minutes today. We appreciate you here on Locked On NFL.